The phone rang at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly reports when my cell buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Another spam call, probably. But something made me pick up. Hello? Silence. Then a voice I didn't recognize, gravelly and threatening. Listen carefully. We have your wife. My blood turned to ice. What? Who is this? You want to see Sarah again? You'll do exactly what I say. No police, no games, $50,000 or she dies. Before I could respond, I heard it. Sarah's voice in the background screaming my name. Mike, help me, please, they're going to... The line went dead. I stared at my phone, hands shaking. This couldn't be real. This stuff didn't happen to people like us. We lived in suburbia. We had a mortgage and matching coffee mugs. We weren't the kind of people who got kidnapped. But that was definitely Sarah's voice. I called her cell immediately, straight to voicemail. Her sweet, professional greeting felt like a mockery now. Hi, you've reached Sarah. Leave a message and I'll get back to you soon. I grabbed my keys and raced home, running 3 red lights and praying no cops would stop me. The entire 15-minute drive, my mind spiraled through possibilities. Random kidnapping, someone targeting my business. Had I made enemies I didn't know about? The front door was unlocked. That was the first sign something was wrong. Sarah religiously locked every door, even when she was just stepping out to get the mail. Sarah? I called out, my voice echoing through our empty house. The living room looked like a war zone. The coffee table was overturned, magazines scattered across the hardwood floor. Sarah's favorite vase, the one her grandmother gave her, lay shattered near the hallway. Her purse was dumped out by the front door, contents spilled everywhere. I ran through very room, calling her name. Nothing. She was gone. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. The kidnapper had said no police, but as I stood in our destroyed living room, staring at the chaos, I couldn't think straight. $50,000. I didn't have that kind of cash lying around. What if they hurt her while I was trying to get the money? What if this was just the beginning? My hands were trembling as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My wife's been kidnapped. They want ransom money. I think they took her from our house. As I gave the dispatcher our address, I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. The sound should have been comforting. Instead, all I could think about was the kidnapper's warning. No police. Had I just signed Sarah's death warrant? To understand how we got here, you need to know about Sarah and me. 8 years ago, I thought I'd won the lottery when she said yes to marrying me. Sarah was everything I wasn't. Organized, social, ambitious. She worked in marketing for a tech startup and had this infectious laugh that could light up any room. I was the steady one, the provider. I ran a small accounting firm that I'd built from nothing, working 60-hour weeks to give us the life we wanted. We had what everyone called the perfect marriage. Nice house in the suburbs, 2 cars in the driveway, annual vacations to places with white sand beaches. From the outside, we looked like we had it all figured out. But looking back now, I can see the cracks that were forming. It started small. Sarah would mention wanting to try new restaurants and I'd be too tired from work. She'd suggest weekend trips and I'd have client deadlines. She'd want to talk about her day and I'd be distracted by emails on my phone. You're not listening, she'd say, and I'd look up from my laptop with that guilty expression ever. My husband knows too well. Sorry, babe, just finishing this one thing. She'd smile that patient smile of hers, but I can see now it was getting thinner each time. The complaints became more frequent over the past few months. I feel like I'm invisible in this house, she'd said just last week. Like I'm married to your work laptop instead of you. I'd brushed it off. Come on, Sarah. You know I work hard for us, for our future. What future? She'd shot back. We never talk about kids anymore. We don't even talk, period. When's the last time we went on a real date? Not just dinner while you check your phone every 5 minutes. I'd gotten defensive. That's not fair. I took you to Antonio's last month. That was 3 months ago, Mike. And you spent half of it on a work call. The worst part? She was right. I'd been so focused on building our financial security, that I'd forgotten to actually live our life. But I thought providing was enough. I thought working hard to give her nice things was the same as giving her my attention. Sarah had been talking about couples therapy. Just to help us communicate better, she'd said. I'd agreed, but kept postponing it. There was always another client crisis, another deadline, another reason to put it off. We don't need therapy, I'd told her just 2 weeks ago. We just need to get through this busy season, and then I'll have more time. She'd stared at me for a long moment, and I remember thinking she looked sad. Not angry, just deeply, profoundly sad. You always say that, Mike, but busy season never ends for you. I'd kissed her forehead and promised things would change, but I didn't change anything. I kept working late, kept prioritizing clients over conversations, kept taking our marriage for granted. Now, standing in our destroyed living room waiting for the police, I would have given anything to have just one more of those conversations I'd be too busy for. If I'd known it was the last normal evening we'd ever have together, I would have put down the laptop and listened. The police arrived in what felt like seconds, but was probably closer to 10 minutes. 3 squad cars, lights flashing, turning our quiet suburban street into something from a crime show. Detective Martinez was the first through the door, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Mr. Patterson? I'm Detective Martinez. Tell me exactly what happened. I walked her through everything. The phone call, the voice, Sarah's screaming, the ransom demand. My voice cracked when I described hearing Sarah in the background. You said $50,000? Detective Martinez was taking notes in a small pad. That's what he said. I could maybe get that together, but it would take time. Liquidating accounts, talking to the bank. We'll worry about that later. Right now, I need you to walk me through the scene exactly as you found it. A forensics team had arrived and was photographing everything. The overturned coffee table, the broken vase, Sarah's scattered purse contents. Each camera flash felt like another piece of evidence that this nightmare was real. The front door was unlocked when you arrived? Detective Martinez asked. Yes, Sarah never leaves doors unlocked. Never. She made another note. Any enemies? Anyone who might have a grudge against either of you? I racked my brain. No, nothing like that. I'm an accountant. Sarah works in marketing. We live pretty quiet lives. That's when it hit me. I really didn't know much about Sarah's daily routine anymore. When she left for work, who she ate lunch with, what she did on her breaks. How had I become so disconnected from my own wife's life? I'll need a list of her friends, co-workers, anyone she's been in regular contact with, Detective, Martinez said. Honestly, I'm not sure who she's close with at work these days. The admission felt shameful. She mentions names, but I don't really know them. The detective's expression remained professional, but I caught something that might have been pity. A younger officer approached. Detective, we got the trace on that phone number. It's a burner phone purchased with cash 3 days ago at a convenience store downtown. No security footage useful enough to identify the buyer. What about the neighbors? Canvass is ongoing. The Hendersons across the street have a security camera that might have caught something. We're pulling the footage now. 20 minutes later, we were huddled around a laptop, watching grainy security footage from 2:30 p.m. A white van had pulled into our driveway, stayed for about 15 minutes, then left. The angle made it impossible to see the license plate clearly, and the driver wore a baseball cap pulled low. Could be random, Detective Martinez said. Could be someone who's been watching your routines. The thought made my skin crawl. Someone had been watching us? Watching Sarah? Mr. Patterson, I have to ask, any problems in your marriage? Money troubles? Affairs? No, I said quickly. Too quickly. We've been a little distant lately. I work a lot, but nothing serious. The detective studied my face. Distance can lead to vulnerability. People make connections when they're feeling isolated. I didn't like what she was implying. Sarah wouldn't. She's not having an affair. I'm not suggesting she is, but kidnappers often target people who seem approachable, lonely. They study their victims. As the forensics team finished up and the other officers left, Detective Martinez handed me her card. We're going to trace Sarah's phone, check her credit cards, talk to her workplace. In the meantime, if the kidnapper calls again, you call me immediately. Don't try to handle this alone. After everyone left, I sat in our violated living room, surrounded by fingerprint powder and evidence markers. I realized I didn't even know what Sarah had been doing earlier that day. I couldn't just sit there waiting. While the police did their official investigation, I decided to search our house for anything that might help find Sarah. What I discovered made me question everything I thought I knew about my wife. It started in her home office, a room I rarely entered. Sarah always said it was her creative space where she worked on freelance marketing projects. I'd respected her privacy, never really looking through her things. I wish I'd paid more attention. The first thing I found was a credit card statement in a drawer I'd never opened, a card I didn't know existed, in Sarah's name only. The charges were strange: payments to something called Truth Seeker Investigations, multiple transactions at a storage facility across town, and several cash advances totaling over $3,000 in the past month. Truth Seeker Investigations? What had Sarah been investigating? In her desk's bottom drawer, hidden beneath old marketing magazines, I found a stack of therapy appointment cards. Dr. Patricia Reeves, marriage and family counselor. The cards were stamped with dates going back 3 months. Sarah had been going to therapy, without me. But it was the journal that really broke my heart. I almost put it back without reading it. Journals felt private, sacred. But Sarah was missing, possibly in danger. I needed answers. The entries started 6 months ago. Mike worked until 9 p.m. again tonight. When I tried to tell him about my promotion opportunity, he just nodded and said, "That's great, babe," without looking up from his computer. I feel like I'm living with a stranger. Watched a movie alone again. Mike was all, then a conference call that couldn't wait. I'm starting to wonder if he'd even notice if I disappeared. Dr. Reeves says I need to communicate my needs more clearly, but how do you tell someone you're lonely when they're sitting right next to you? Each entry was like a knife to my chest. Sarah had been drowning, and I'd been too busy to notice. But then I found entries that made my blood run cold. Found some interesting articles about psychological experiments. Amazing what people will do when they feel like they have no other choice. Dr. Reeves says extreme situations sometimes require extreme measures to break through denial. And then, dated just 2 weeks ago. I printed some research at work today. Case studies about trauma bonding and crisis situations. Mike always responds better under pressure than during normal conversations. Maybe that's what it takes. My hands were shaking as I kept reading. The most recent entry was from 5 days ago. I know this sounds crazy, but what if something dramatic happened? What if Mike thought he might lose me? Would he finally wake up and realize what we have? Or what we used to have? At the bottom of the drawer, I found printed pages from Sarah's work computer. Research about kidnapping statistics, psychology articles about trauma responses, case studies about couples who'd survived crisis situations together. And then I found the most damning piece of evidence. A printed webpage from WikiHow titled, "How to Stage a Disappearance for a Social Experiment." It was dated 6 days ago. I sat back in Sarah's chair, my mind reeling. Was Sarah's kidnapping not real? But I'd heard her screaming on the phone. I'd seen our destroyed living room. The fear in her voice had been absolutely genuine. Hadn't it? I thought about the voice on the phone. Gravelly, threatening, but somehow familiar in a way I couldn't place. I thought about the timing of the call, right when I'd be focused on work but still likely to answer. My phone buzzed. Zed with a text from Detective Martinez. "Any update on that list of Sarah's contacts?" I stared at the message, then at the evidence spread across Sarah's desk. Should I tell the police what I'd found? Was I jumping to conclusions? Maybe Sarah had been researching this stuff for a completely innocent reason. Maybe she was writing an article, or helping a friend, or maybe my wife had orchestrated her own kidnapping to teach me a lesson. The thought made me sick. But as I sat surrounded by her secrets, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't really know Sarah at all anymore. And if I was right about this, then I'd just involved the police in my wife's elaborate deception. The second call came at 8:23 p.m., just as Detective Martinez and her team were setting up phone monitoring equipment in our kitchen. "Remember," Detective Martinez had instructed, Keep him talking as long as possible. We need time to trace the call. When my phone rang, everyone in the room went silent. The detective gave me a thumbs up and started the recording equipment. Hello? You called the cops. The same gravelly voice, but angrier now, more aggressive. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. Big mistake. Huge mistake. Then I heard Sarah's voice again, but this time it was different, more desperate, more broken. Mike, please. They said they're going to hurt me because you didn't follow instructions. Please, just give them what they want. Sarah, are you okay? Where are you? You have until midnight, the voice continued. 50,000 in cash. Leave it in a duffel bag at the old Riverside Park Pavilion. Come alone, or your wife pays the price. Wait, I need more time. No more time, no more cops. We know they're there with you right now. My blood ran cold. How could they know that? Mike! Sarah's voice was pure terror now. Please don't let them hurt me. I'm so sorry for everything I said. I love you. I love you so much. The line went dead. Detective Martinez immediately started barking orders to her team. Did we get a trace? How long was the call? Check all surveillance in a 3-block radius. But I was focused on something else. Something about Sarah's voice in that second call bothered me. The words she'd used. I'm so sorry for everything I said. When had Sarah ever apologized for speaking her mind? In 8 years of marriage, she'd been many things. Frustrated, disappointed, angry, but never apologetic for expressing her feelings. She'd always been proud of her directness. Mr. Patterson? Detective Martinez was studying my face. You look like you've seen a ghost. The things she said, they didn't sound like Sarah. People say things they wouldn't normally say when they're terrified. That was true, but combined with everything I'd found in her office, I was starting to see a different picture. Detective, I need to tell you something. I showed her the credit card statements, the therapy cards, the journal entries, and the printed research about kidnapping cases. Detective Martinez's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. You think your wife staged this? I don't know what to think, but look at this timeline, the research, the cash withdrawals, the journal entries about dramatic situations. Detective Martinez studied the printed WikiHow page. This is unusual, but Mr. Patterson, we heard your wife's voice. She sounded genuinely terrified. I know, but Sarah's good at her job. She does presentations, mock-ups, marketing campaigns. She knows how to sell a story. You're talking about your wife faking her own kidnapping. I'm talking about my wife being desperate enough to try anything to get my attention. Ion. The room fell silent except for the hum of the monitoring equipment. If you're right, Detective Martinez said slowly, then we're dealing with filing false police reports, fraud, conspiracy. This isn't a prank, Mr. Patterson. This is serious criminal activity. I thought about Sarah, somewhere out there, possibly counting on me to play along with her elaborate plan. She'd wanted to teach me a lesson about taking her for granted. Instead, I'd called the police and turned her desperate cry for attention into a potential felony case. What do we do now? I asked. Detective Martinez looked at her team, then back at me. We follow the evidence. And if your wife is really behind this, she's about to learn that there are consequences for manipulating the justice system. As they prepared for the midnight drop at Riverside Park, I couldn't help but wonder, had Sarah really thought this through? Or was I about to watch my wife's life fall apart because she loved me enough to risk everything to save our marriage? Detective Martinez returned the next morning with news that shattered whatever doubt I had left about Sarah's innocence. We pulled your wife's phone records and GPS data, she said, settling into our kitchen chair with a thick file folder. This is where things get interesting. She spread out printed maps and timeline charts across our kitchen table like she was planning a military operation. According to her phone's GPS, Sarah visited Eastside Storage Solutions 3 times in the past 2 weeks. The day before her disappearance, she was there for 47 minutes. Storage Solutions? We don't have a storage unit. We checked. She rented Unit 247 under her maiden name 6 weeks ago, paid 3 months in advance, cash. My stomach dropped. What's in it? We're getting a warrant, but the facility manager was helpful. He remembers her because she came in with a man. Mid-30s, brown hair, wearing a company polo shirt. Detective Martinez slid a grainy security photo across the table. The image quality was poor, but I could make out Sarah talking to a man I didn't recognize. We ran the license plate of the car he was driving. Belongs to James Morrison, works at Pinnacle Marketing, same company as your wife. James Morrison, I'd heard that name before. Sarah had mentioned to James a few times recently. Something about a new project they were working on together. There's more, Detective Martinez continued. Bank records show Sarah withdrew $3,000 in cash over the past month. Always in small amounts, always from different ATMs. She handed me another sheet of paper. And then there's this. It was a printout of Sarah's internet search history from her work computer. Psychological effects of kidnapping on family members. How long does it take police to trace phone calls? Teaching narcissistic husbands lessons. Fake kidnapping legal consequences. Voice disguising apps Android. The last search was dated 2 days before her disappearance. Your wife was very thorough in her research, Detective Martinez said. But she made one critical mistake. What's that? She underestimated how seriously we take kidnapping cases, and she overestimated her ability to control the situation once law enforcement got involved. I stared at the evidence spread across our kitchen table. Every piece pointed to the same impossible conclusion. My wife had faked her own kidnapping. Detective, what happens now? Now we finish what she started. We're going to that storage unit, and we're going to find your wife. 2 hours later, I was sitting in an unmarked police car outside Eastside Storage Solutions, watching Detective Martinez's team prepare to breach Unit 247. The facility manager, a nervous man in his 60s, kept wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool morning air. To want to be clear, I had no idea anything illegal was happening. She seemed like a nice lady, said she was storing stuff for a surprise party. What kind of surprise party needs a storage unit? I muttered. Detective Martinez's radio crackled. Unit is secured. You're going to want to see this. Inside Unit 247, we found what looked like a movie set. Fake blood packets, torn clothing, a tripod with a smartphone attached, and professional-grade audio recording equipment. There were printed scripts with dialogue, including the exact words I'd heard Sarah say during the ransom calls. But the most damning evidence was a laptop computer with video files dated the day of Sarah's disappearance. The files showed Sarah and James Morrison rehearsing the phone calls, recording audio clips of her screaming, and setting up the fake struggle in our living room. Jesus, I whispered, watching my wife practice sounding terrified on the computer screen. Mr. Patterson, Detective Martinez said quietly, I need you to see this last file. She clicked on a video dated just 2 days ago. Sarah was sitting alone in the storage unit looking directly at the camera. If you're watching this, Mike, it means my plan worked. It means you finally called the police instead of just trying to handle everything yourself. It means you finally realized that losing me would matter more than missing a few work calls. On screen, Sarah's eyes were filled with tears, but she was smiling. I know this seems extreme. Dr. Reeves would probably have me committed if she knew what I was planning, but I can't live like a ghost in my own marriage anymore. I love you too much to just give up, and I love myself too much to keep disappearing. The video continued for another minute, with Sarah explaining the plan and expressing hope that the shock would finally wake me up to what we'd lost. She really did this to save your marriage, Detective Martinez observed. I nodded, unable to speak. But as I watched my wife's desperate video confession, all I could think about was how Sarah was about to discover that some lessons come with consequences she never anticipated. We found them at the storage unit. Detective Martinez had traced Sarah's phone to the facility, and when we arrived with backup units and a warrant, Unit 247 was occupied. Through the thin metal door, we could hear voices, Sarah's laugh, and a man's voice I now recognized as James Morrison. This is the police. Open the door. The voices inside went silent. What happened next will be burned into my memory forever. The door rolled up slowly, and there was Sarah, my wife of 8 years, sitting on a folding chair next to a card table with takeout containers. She was wearing the same clothes from her kidnapping video, artfully torn and stained with fake blood. James Morrison stood behind her, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Sarah's eyes met mine, and I watched her face cycle through shock, fear, and finally resignation. Mike, she said quietly, you weren't supposed to. We planned for you to. Sarah Martinez, You're under arrest for filing false police reports, fraud, and conspiracy. Detective Martinez stepped forward with handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Wait! Sarah stood up, panic in her voice. You don't understand. This wasn't meant to hurt anyone. I just needed Mike to see. Ma'am, you need to remain silent and comply with arrest procedures. As Detective Martinez read Sarah her rights, I stood frozen, watching my wife's elaborate plan crumble in real time. James Morrison was also being cuffed by another officer, mumbling something about how it was just supposed to be pretend. Sarah, I finally managed to say, how could you do this? She turned to me with tears streaming down her face. Because I was drowning, Mike. We were drowning, and you couldn't see it. So you faked a kidnapping? You made me think you were going to die? I made you care. For the first time in months, you put down your phone and actually focused on me. Detective Martinez was trying to guide Sarah toward the police car, but Sarah kept talking, desperate to make me understand. Do you know what it's like to beg your husband for attention, to compete with emails and conference calls for 5 minutes of conversation? I felt like I was married to a stranger. But this? I gestured at the storage unit full of props and fake evidence. This was your solution? I researched it for weeks. I knew exactly how to make it believable but keep it from going too far. I had James call from specific locations, timed everything perfectly. It was supposed to last just long enough to scare you into remembering what we meant to each other. James Morrison spoke up from beside the other police car. Sarah, we should have stopped when he called the cops. I told you this was getting out of hand. Sarah whirled around. You were fine with it when we were planning? You said it was romantic that I loved Mike enough to fight for our marriage. I didn't know you meant literally fighting the law. As I watched Sarah being placed in the back of a police car, I felt a complex mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. Relief that she was safe. Betrayal that she'd lied so elaborately. Guilt that our marriage had gotten so bad she'd felt this was her only option. But overwhelmingly, I felt a devastating sadness. Because looking at Sarah through the police car window, mascara streaked, fake blood on her clothes, handcuffed in the back seat, I realized she'd been right about one thing. I had been taking her for granted. I had been treating our marriage like it was invincible while I focused on everything else. The problem was, her solution had just made everything infinitely worse. Mr. Patterson, Detective Martinez approached me as the other officers secured the scene. I need to know, do you want to press charges? I looked at Sarah through the car window. She was staring back at me with a mixture of hope and terror. I don't know. Take your time. But understand that regardless of your decision, the state is likely to pursue charges for the false police report and waste of public resources. This investigation involved multiple officers, forensics teams, and substantial taxpayer money. As I stood in the parking lot of Eastside Storage Solutions, watching my wife sit in the back of a police car, I realized that Sarah's desperate gamble to save our marriage might have just destroyed it completely. 3 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom watching my wife face the consequences of her elaborate deception. Sarah had been charged with filing false police reports, fraud, conspiracy, and misuse of emergency services. James Morrison faced similar charges plus an additional count for his role in the scheme. Both had been released on bail, but the legal process was just beginning. The prosecutor, a stern woman named District Attorney Collins, didn't show any sympathy for Sarah's motivations. Your Honor, this case represents a serious abuse of our justice system, she argued. The defendant didn't just lie to her husband. She manipulated multiple law enforcement agencies, wasted thousands of taxpayer dollars, and diverted critical resources from real emergencies. Sarah's lawyer, a public defender who looked barely older than a college student, tried his best to paint Sarah as a desperate woman driven to extremes by a failing marriage. Your Honor, Mrs. Patterson was clearly struggling with severe emotional distress. Her actions, while misguided, were motivated by love and a desperate attempt to save her marriage. The judge, a gray-haired woman who'd probably seen every type of case imaginable, wasn't buying it. Ms. Patterson, please stand. Sarah rose on shaky legs. She'd lost weight over the past few weeks, and her usually perfect makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. In my 30 years on the bench, I've seen many people make poor choices under emotional stress. But what you did goes beyond poor judgment. You knowingly filed false reports, wasted significant public resources, and caused genuine fear and trauma to your husband. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. The judge's words about my trauma felt strange. Was I a victim in this situation? Sarah had hurt me, yes, but she'd hurt herself far more. However, the judge continued, I also recognize that this appears to be a first offense motivated by desperation rather than malice. Sarah's lawyer looked hopeful. Ms. Patterson, you are sentenced to 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service with the local crisis hotline, mandatory couples counseling if your husband agrees to participate, and restitution to the city for the costs of the investigation, totaling $8,400. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. Additionally, you will submit to regular psychological evaluation and cannot leave the state without permission from your probation officer. James Morrison received a similar sentence, though he also lost his job at Pinnacle Marketing when the story broke. His involvement had been motivated partly by what he admitted was romantic feelings for Sarah, feelings she insisted she hadn't reciprocated beyond friendship. After the hearing, Sarah and I stood outside the courthouse, not sure what to say to each other. Mike, she started, I know sorry isn't enough. I know what I did was insane, I finished. What you did was absolutely insane. I know. You could have gone to prison, Sarah. Real prison. For years. I know. We stood there in silence, two people who'd shared 8 years of marriage but felt like strangers. The judge mentioned couples counseling, Sarah said quietly. Yeah, she did. Would you consider it? I looked at the woman I'd married. Brilliant, creative, passionate Sarah, who'd been so desperate to reach me that she'd risked everything on an elaborate lie. I don't know, I said honestly. I need time to process all of this. I understand. As we walked to our separate cars, Sarah was staying with her sister while we figured things out. I realized that her plan had worked in the most tragic way possible. She'd wanted to shock me into paying attention to our marriage. Mission accomplished. 6 months later, I'm sitting in Dr. Patricia Reeves's office, the same therapist Sarah had been seeing in secret. We're here together this time, trying to rebuild something from the wreckage of our marriage. How are you feeling about the progress you've both made? Dr. Reeves asks. It's a loaded question. Progress feels like too simple a word for the complicated process we've been through. Sarah completed her community service 3 months ago. She spent those 200 hours answering crisis hotline calls, helping people who were genuinely in emergency situations. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. She was helping others who were experiencing the kind of real terror she'd fake. It gave me perspective, Sarah said during one of our sessions, talking to people who were actually in danger, who were genuinely afraid for their lives. It made me realize how selfish and destructive my plan was. We've been separated since the arrest, living apart while we both figured out who we were individually and whether we wanted to be together as a couple. I sold my accounting firm and took a job with regular hours. Sarah started seeing a new therapist in addition to our couples sessions. The most surprising discovery? We actually started talking to each other. Real talking. About feelings, fears, hopes, disappointments. All the conversations we should have been having for years, but never made time for. I was so focused on being a good provider that I forgot to be a good husband, I told Dr. Reeves during our session today. And I was so focused on getting Mike's attention that I lost sight of everything else, Sarah added. I became someone I don't even recognize. The legal consequences were the easy part compared to the emotional work. Sarah finished probation early for good behavior. James Morrison moved to another state and, last I heard, was working in a completely different field. The whole experience scared him straight from any future romantic complications. But the real question everyone keeps asking is, are we getting back together? The answer is complicated. We love each other. That was never in question. The fake kidnapping proved we both cared more than we'd been showing. But love isn't enough to rebuild trust after something like this. I dream about that phone call sometimes, I told Sarah recently. I hear your voice screaming my name, and I wake up in a cold sweat. Even knowing it wasn't real, even knowing you were safe the whole time, the fear was real for me. I know, she said quietly. I gave you genuine trauma to solve a fake problem. Some days are better than others. We're dating again. Actual dating, with planned activities and phones put away. We talk every night, even if it's just for 15 minutes. We're learning how to be married to each other instead of just living in the same house. But there are trust issues. When Sarah's phone goes to voicemail, I get anxious. When she's late coming home, my mind goes to dark places. When she suggests trying something new or exciting, part of me wonders if it's another elaborate plan. Trust has to be rebuilt brick by brick, Dr. Reeves tells us. There's no shortcut through this process. The strangest part? Sarah's desperate plan taught me exactly what she'd hoped it would. I learned what it would feel like to lose her. I learned that no amount of professional success matters if you don't have someone to share it with. I learned that marriage requires active participation, not just passive presence. The problem is that she also learned the consequences of taking drastic action without considering all the variables. 6 months ago, we were a couple drifting apart due to neglect and poor communication. Today, we're a couple actively working to rebuild our relationship while dealing with the aftermath of criminal charges and public humiliation. I don't know if we'll make it. Some days I think we're stronger than ever because we've been forced to address problems we'd been ignoring for years. Other days I think the foundation of trust is too damaged to support a healthy marriage. But I do know this. Neither of us will ever take our relationship for granted again. Sarah risked everything to teach me that lesson. Whether or not our marriage survives, that lesson was learned. The question now is whether it was worth the price we both paid. And if you're reading this story wondering whether you'd have done the same thing Sarah did, or whether you'd have called the police like I did, let me give you some advice. Don't wait for a crisis to save your relationship. Have the hard conversations now. Put down your phone. Ask how your partner's really doing. Listen to the answer. Because the alternative to communication isn't dramatic revelation. It's destruction. Take it from someone who learned that lesson the hardest way possible.